I think the French prime minister said this was a dark day for Europe, which means to me that was a good deal for the United States.
Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Monday, July 28th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are Real Clear Politics president and co-founder Tom Bevan and RCP White House correspondent Phil Wegman. So, gentlemen, the president is in Scotland. He's playing some golf, but he's also making news. He did this 75-minute press conference that he held jointly with the British Prime Minister. He talked about Gaza. He talked about the new trade deal he made with the European Union, and he talked about Vladimir Putin. So, Tom, he shortened the 50-day deadline that he had given Moscow to enter into negotiations to about 10 or 12 days. And he said this about Putin when asked whether he thought Putin had been lying to him.
Well, I don't want to use the word lying. All I know is we'd have a good talk, and it seemed on, let's say, 3 occasions, it seemed that we were going to have a ceasefire and maybe peace, and you divide it up and you do whatever you have to do, that obviously, to get to the end. And all of a sudden, missiles are flying into Kiev and other places. And I say, what's that all about? I spoke to him 3-4 hours ago, and it looked like we were on our way. And then I'd say, forget it, and I'm not going to talk anymore. You know, this has happened on too many occasions, and I don't like it. I don't like it.
So, Tom, what caught my ear there was this line. He said, you divide it up, you do whatever you have to do. That's kind of not what Ukraine has in mind, I think. But
No.
What do you make of? Is this a tougher? Is it going to be tougher on Putin?
Yeah, interesting that he would phrase it that way, and in the context of Putin sort of on multiple occasions sort of spurning his offer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And or perhaps more accurately, maybe seeming like he agreed with the offer, but then firing missiles and drones. So look, Trump obviously frustrated, not happy. This is one of those things he said, this war never would have started. He ended on day one. Here we are, 6 months in. So I think that's a significant thing that he's basically chopped the window down from 50 days to like 10 days or the end of the week. But clearly, the biggest takeaway from this trip is this deal with the EU. I mean, this was, if you read the coverage of it today, 15% tariffs, which is, I think the standard tariff rate was like 4.3%. So America's going to get more tariffs. EU has committed to $1.3 trillion of investment, 750 million in energy, 750 billion, excuse me, and 600 billion in further investments. So, and if you look at the coverage of this, I think the French prime minister said this was a dark day for Europe, which means to me that was a good deal for the United States. If there are winners and losers, and the Europeans think they are losers, that means Americans were winners in their mind. And so I think this was a big deal. I mean, the EU is a massive trading partner, and one that, look, I don't want to say they've had the upper hand, but certainly this is a total reset and in terms of the trading relationship between the United States and the EU, and one that is much, much more favorable to the United States. And so in that sense, I think that was the biggest takeaway from this trip.
Yeah. Well, Tom, you got to go back and reread your Adam Smith. Free trade is supposed to be winners and winners, remember?
Oh, right.
But Phil, what do you make of it?
I asked Donald Trump in the Oval Office a few months back about this EU proposal of 0 for 0 tariffs on industrial goods and vehicles. And Donald Trump said, no, of course we wouldn't do 0 for 0. It's got to be more, because he's trying to solve for what he sees as historic wrongs. So as this deal stands, tariffs are still in place in the United States. They're not in Europe. There's this promise of investment. But this administration, they really see this as an opportunity to try and right the wrongs of the last half century. They think that it's the Europeans, that is the Japanese, others who got rich in trading with the United States, who now need to bear the brunt of things. And thus far, maybe our trading partners, they don't agree with that, but they realize that when you're dealing with the world superpower with the largest consumer market, you've got to make accommodations. And that's exactly what they've done here.
Yeah. Tom, I was interested because I heard Larry Kudlow today, who, it's kind of a free trader, sort of throwing in the towel on this. It was sort of interesting to hear Larry's take, saying, you know what, maybe the critics have been wrong about Trump all along, and we're not seeing the inflation. We're going to have good GDP numbers coming out, I guess, later this week, according to Larry. So, I mean, is there, and this all comes on the heel of the Japan deal. He's still talking to China. I mean, are you ready to sort of give Trump kudos for this? I mean, you've been sort of in his camp on this stuff all along. Well, I've been more skeptical. I would put it that way.
Yeah, well, that certainly is true. I've been saying all along, I think, like, let's give this time. We can't, there was this rush to pronounce the tariffs are awful and all these terrible things are going to happen. And I consistently said, you know what? Maybe that's true, but maybe it's not. You have to wait and see how these things play out. We have to be skeptical of the so-called experts who try and dictate policy and sort of squelch dissent when things are first happening or being proposed or policies are implemented and initiated. Look, Larry Kudlow has been a sort of a lonely voice in the administration, surrounded by Lighthizer and Navarro and all these folks, right? And I think Larry was initially skeptical of tariffs as well. I mean, as you mentioned, he has been a free trader and supply side guy for a long, long time. But all of these sort of chicken little worst case scenarios about tariffs have not materialized as of yet. And I think
as of yet,
again, yes, but so far as things have gone, I think you have to give Trump credit for, again, sort of resetting the global dynamic when it comes to trade relations with the United States. We are the 800-pound gorilla. We have not been treating ourselves that way for a long, long time, and Trump put an end to that. And so far, there have been some real dividends that have come from that. So I still have an open mind about it. But I mean, if you're judging it just as of right now, objectively, I think Trump has been winning on this issue.
Yeah, and just real quick, I talked to a number of economists earlier this year who were predicting a recession as early as this summer. Clearly, that's not the case, and maybe we'll have to wait for some of these downstream effects to come later. But purely in the political realm, I think that, Tom, I think you might be underselling the point. The Overton window has changed such now that the public has looked at these tariffs and said, this didn't destroy my life. Baseball bats and aluminum cans, they're not that much more expensive. That my question now is, how does a Democratic administration come in and take these tariffs off of China? How do they take them off of the Europeans? I think that there's going to be a political cost for any politician who wants to do that when it comes to the working class vote. Certainly the union vote. I'm wondering if maybe it might not be 15% permanently, but it's going to be pretty difficult for any future president to try and throttle back to even an actual reciprocal free trade agreement.
Well, we'll see. I remain maybe the lone skeptic.
That's just because Andy is buying all these cheap de minimis orders from online. How do you think we get this podcast equipment?
Right, yeah, that's right. So, Phil, let's talk about some domestic politics. The Senate race in North Carolina. It's predicted to be a tight one after Tom Tillis announced his retirement. A lot of people think the Democrats got some good news, possible pickup. Roy Cooper, former governor, threw his hat in the ring. He would most likely square off against the Trump-endorsed Republican National Committee chairman, Michael Whatley, who was, as far as I know, never run for office before. Cooper's won multiple times statewide. What's at stake here? Why is this race important?
What's at stake is the consequences of Donald Trump devouring his own bench. He basically pushed Tom Tillis out the door, and then we saw Tillis act as one of the last rhinos, sort of fight the White House on his way out. I don't know if this will be the deciding race to determine who controls the Senate, but Laura Trump looked at it, said no. We'll see if Whatley has better luck, but it went from being, a Republican seat to right now, it seems like David versus Goliath. Whatley's a good operator. I don't know if he's a good candidate. Certainly Cooper is a good candidate.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats got their guy. I mean, this is who they wanted. He is as good of a candidate as you can find for a Democrat in North Carolina. Again, proven, winner statewide, got great name recognition. I mean, he's a known quantity to voters there, so I think he probably is now the favorite. And look, in the you look at this map, and Democrats, um, this is big for them. I mean, if they're able to take this seat, it helps them because I don't know that they're going to get to a majority, but they certainly want to keep it as close as they possibly can, and they're defending seats in some states, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, where they're going to have a fight on their hands. So this definitely expands the map in their favor. And Republicans, I don't want to say they've thrown a seat away.
Hmm.
I agree with Phil. I mean, Mike Watley is very well connected, good operator, but I don't know that he's ever run statewide before. He's going to get a lot of scrutiny, and we'll see whether we'll see what his political chops look like on the trail.
Yeah, and I guess Phil, the other sort of vulnerable House or vulnerable Senate seat people are talking about is Susan Collins up in Maine. This now and Susan Collins' seat are sort of the two most likely to flip. At least that's what
Susan
I'm
Collins
seeing.
is just a different breed of Republican politician. I mean, this is someone who voted against Obamacare repeal. This is someone who has had no problem, thumbing her nose at Donald Trump. The joke inside of Collins' office is that she sits atop a throne of skulls because any challenger keeps losing to her, at least on the
Right.
Republican side. We'll see if she can defend her seat. But Susan Collins seems to be adjacent to, but somehow separate from the normal sort of news cycle. The considerations that a different Republican incumbent would have to worry about, I don't think they affect her in the same way, just because it seems that her state likes her. She seems to understand the pulse of that place.
Yeah, I mean, you look at someone like Roy Cooper. If you concocted someone in a test tube to run in that state, it would be him, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a successful governor. Before that, I guess attorney general, lieutenant governor, something. But he's been in office a long time, and very successful. I don't know if there's anyone like that in Maine ready to take on Susan Collins.
No, and Phil's right about Susan Collins. I mean, she's the perennial target for Democrats. They can never get to her. She always manages to hang on. She probably will again this time. And the other seat that the Democrats are keeping a close eye on, obviously, is Texas, which is where John Cornyn's facing a primary challenge. If he loses, goes down to a challenge from his right, Ken Paxton. Potentially Democrats think that seat can be in play. We'll have to see how things progress, but that's certainly the other Republican seat that the Democrats are keeping an eye on.
Tom, this judge in Boston, she blocked the administration's move to defund Planned Parenthood. And when I say, block, this was in the big, beautiful bill. This was, I think, settled law, but this is an argument that Planned Parenthood made, and apparently the judge agrees.
Indira Talwani, District Court of Massachusetts. She's a Barack Obama appointee. Yes, this is a novel argument. She says patients are likely to suffer adverse health consequences. In particular, restricting members' ability to provide healthcare services threatens an increase in unintended pregnancies and attendant complications because of reduced access to effective contraceptives and an increase in undiagnosed and untreated STIs. So she's apparently she's a doctor, and I don't know what any of that has to do with the law that Congress passed, right? The House has the power, Congress has the power, the House has the power of the purse strings. This is something that Trump signed into law. So I think this is, we've talked about these injunctions and these federal laws basically sort of usurping the power and trying to block and thwart Trump's agenda. And this is that on steroids, it seems to me. Unless I'm missing something, Phil, this seems just completely, unconstitutional.
Well, my legal education taps out at Schoolhouse Rock, but correct me if I'm wrong. If the legislature passes a bill that the president then signs into law and it doesn't violate the US Constitution, it would seem that the court should be silent on this. I'm not certain what all the legalese is here, but it seems cut and dry. This is something that Congress put forward. The president signed it into law. I'm not sure what the argument is here. It's going to frustrate this White House to no end. But I mean, this is even something that the Trump campaign ran on. They said that they were going to defund Planned Parenthood. This isn't something nefarious. This is something that it seems that the voters had an opportunity to weigh in directly on.
I mean, I think that the argument, Andy, is that Planned Parenthood wasn't mentioned directly in the statute. This is a cutting of Medicaid and will cause Planned Parenthood clinics to close. But again, just because it wasn't mentioned in the statute, I don't know how that seems like kind of thin gruel to me.
Yeah, I understood what was also an argument about free speech, that somehow Planned Parenthood has a right to advocate certain policies, and they were being punished for exercising that right, as opposed to just a sort of legislative decision to cut funding for an outside group. Which, to Phil's point, Tom, it does seem like that's how the Constitution thought this should work. That the Supreme Court or no court is supposed to be sort of involved in these sorts of decisions that are made by elected officials at the people's behest.
I mean, listen, we'll see. I assume this is gonna, go to the Supreme Court because it's, the judge says she's just basically saying that Planned Parenthood can't be stopped from receiving Medicaid reimbursements, and that has to continue. But again, I don't understand where she thinks she derives that power to be able to tell Congress, who's already passed the statute, who they can and cannot give Medicaid payments to or suspend Medicaid payments to. I mean, that seems completely unreasonable to me. But what do I know? I'm with Phil. I'm like we'll have to get Richard Porter or some lawyer on the show who knows more about this to confirm what I suspect, which is this is absolutely, just like bonkers legal decision.
I love Richard, but I think I know his position without even being a lawyer myself.
Maybe.
Well, yeah, I guess we'll see. Hey, Phil, we're going to hear your interview with Ron DeSantis in the next block. But you took this trip. You've got to tell us about it. You were down at what may become a big tourist destination. I don't know, but you were down in the middle of the Everglades. Tell us about it.
I didn't see any alligators. I did see mosquitoes that were as large as hummingbirds, eaten alive, along with intrepid cameraman Jake Bevan, who I think did a fantastic job. We were not able to go into the Alligator Alcatraz facilities itself. We were there on the runway where detainees are going to be flown out of Florida, but we did get to speak with Governor DeSantis. These pull-asides are pretty rare things, but we were able to press him on a number of different topics. One of them mainly was the state of Florida says that they meet and exceed all standards for prisons. So why weren't we allowed into the facility to see it ourselves? Asked him about some of these allegations that detainees there are unable to access legal help when they need it. And then also, got his response to some of these Democrats who are arguing that he's done nothing more than open up a little Guantanamo Bay there in the Everglades. It was pretty interesting to hear the Florida governor push back on all of that.
So Phil, what was it? You got to get in a car. You got to drive 90 minutes into the middle of the Everglades or something. I mean, what was it like there? Was it bleak? Was it?
The Everglades are beautiful, but there was miles and miles of nothing in all directions. It's about an hour and a half from Miami. We pulled up into a parking lot, and then we were escorted into these vans, driven to a canvas airplane hangar. And DeSantis just had a press conference there right on the tarmac. It was, when they say desolate, they are absolutely right. I'm not certain that there's an actual risk of escape, but anyone who would try would be able to run a long time before they ran into civilization. And look, this is sort of the crowning achievement of DeSantis's second term there. He said that this is the Florida model. He ran on exporting Florida to the rest of the country. That wasn't successful, but on Alligator Alcatraz, he told me that he has shared the blueprints with all of the states who want it. And his argument here is that even with all of the billions of dollars that were in the one big beautiful bill, as Republicans call it, for immigration enforcement, Trump's not going to be able to hit his goals of deportations unless he has state and local buy-in. He's going to have state and local buy-in in Florida because it's incredibly red.
Yeah. This was in Newsweek today. This is an op-ed from Nancy Hiemstra, I think, and Deirdre Conlon. I think I have their names right. This is what they say. Quote, insufficient and contaminated water, inadequate spoiled food, ignored requests for medical care, swarms of mosquitoes, unbearably hot tents that leak when it rains, severe overcrowding, facility personnel who berate and threaten them. We have studied immigration detention for over a decade and can say with grim certainty that it's just a matter of time until someone dies at Alcatraz. Phil, I know you didn't get inside the facility, but you have any sense of if any of that is true?
I can say that the mosquitoes are absolutely a real thing. I'm not certain that they're in the detention facility itself, but I asked DeSantis about some of these allegations, and his response was, of course, critics are going to say that. Of course, they do not want this. This isn't an actual argument about the conditions of the detainees there. It's an argument about how the left, his detractors, don't actually want to see some of these deportations. On this question, though, I mean, I put it to him, some of his detractors said this was Guantanamo Bay. And DeSantis, when he was in the Navy, he actually served at Gitmo. And he said that those claims were outlandish. What was interesting is he said that there was a fake narrative about abuse at Guantanamo Bay, and there's a fake narrative about the conditions at Alligator Alcatraz. But, when I pressed him, I said, are you 100% confident that anyone who is deported out of Alligator Alcatraz doesn't have a legal right to be here in the United States? Can you say with 100% certainty that that's not going to happen? DeSantis pointed to the fact that, this is a human institution and it's fallible and mistakes could happen. He says they're unlikely, but he says mistakes could happen. I think what that reflects is he knows that there's a microscope on this facility. He knows that if anything goes wrong, he's going to be the one to blame. And so he has a vested interest in, trying to keep those conditions there livable so that he doesn't have that scandal.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great interview, and I think people are going to enjoy it when they hear it in the next segment. Look, when you get a chance to go down to some place, and again, although we didn't get to tour the facility, it's so much different. It's so much better to have firsthand knowledge than to just listen to reports that are coming out. I mean, when we saw the Democrats and Demi Wasserman Schultz came out and said, "Oh, it's terrible, and there are all these cages, and they have to, like brush their teeth where they poop and stuff." I mean, clearly you cannot trust, I think, what the spin is coming from either side. And so the idea, if you want to try and get to the truth, you gotta look to primary sources. You gotta have firsthand knowledge and information, and that's what we tried to do by sending Phil and Jake down there to figure out what they could, and obviously interview the governor.
Yeah.
All right. One thing
to
to listen for quickly in that interview is I asked DeSantis about those allegations. He said that they were outlandish, that a lot of them were BS, his words, not mine. But it was notable that he sees Alligator Alcatraz as a deterrent. They are ready to pay people to fly out of the country. They don't want them there at Alligator Alcatraz. But it was notable that he said he hasn't been shooting down each and every allegation because he doesn't want people to come to the facility in the first place.
Yeah, Phil, that's such an interesting point because it does seem like there's a slight, twist on the message, which is they want it to be bad, but not that bad, right? Isn't that sort of what they're saying? Like, don't come here because it's no fun.
It's not a place you want to be.
Yeah, right. But it doesn't have to be a black ops operation either. Anyway, you're listening to RealClearPolitics. Stick around because when we come back, Phil's going to have his interview with Ron DeSantis. Fascinating stuff. Don't go away. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and as promised, here is the full interview of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, conducted by RCP White House correspondent Phil Wegman at Alligator Alcatraz, the new migrant detention facility deep in the Florida Everglades. Here's Phil.
Governor, have you been working with any of your colleagues around the country to export the blue clearance for Alligator Alcatraz?
We've provided it to all the states. They have a nice packet of the Florida blueprint, how it can be done. We were told that there's states that are interested in doing it. We haven't seen any facilities be put up, but we know how to do this stuff. We're very good at it. It can be done, though, and we're hoping that they follow Florida's lead. It will be a force multiplier. I mean, when this thing, the cadence of the flights are starting, when those get up, you're going to see the numbers start to go up, and that's what we need to do.
Have you had any tours from other governors here to see the facilities?
I don't know that any governors have requested it.
Okay. There is this parallel effort to the CBP One app that you mentioned during the press conference where illegal immigrants could self-deport rather than go into DHS custody. Is that cheaper, and is that
much cheaper? I mean, the reality is it's just there's people say there's no due process. There's a lot of process the federal government has to go through to be able to deport somebody once they're in the interior of the country for a time. And so if they're able to do a voluntary deportation, whatever it costs. I mean, the cost of the ones we've done have been, they've been in like the hundreds of dollars in some instances. That is way cheaper than going through the whole thing with DHS and everything. So we're happy to do that. It increases the numbers because the more people that choose that, the more people that can be processed here quickly.
Is the idea that Alligator Alcatraz is a deterrent, so more people are eager to self-deport?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, all the standards are being followed here, but the Dems try to create this narrative and all this stuff. And we debunk it, but you don't necessarily see me on the rooftop saying because the reality is, I hope people would not want to come here. I think it'd be better for them to just they say, hey, the Trump administration is committed to enforcing the law. Florida is not a sanctuary state. They're on board. It's not going to work to try to evade the law at this point, so go ahead and do it. So if that's the message that gets sent from this, then I think that that's good. However, the nonsense that gets spewed, it is BS.
Well, to follow up on that, the press corps was allowed into Alligator Alcatraz when President Trump toured here. Now that it's up and operational and these flights are leaving, why not let the press in so the public can see whether or not they do meet and exceed the standards that you set?
It's an operational question that I've delegated to the folks here who are running it. And so if they find that it's something that could help the mission or wouldn't impede with the mission, they're free to do that, but that's their call.
So you're open to it at some point?
Sure.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, how many of the detainees here currently are hardened criminals, and how many of them were perhaps pulled over by Florida State Patrol for some type of traffic?
Well, they all are on final orders of removal, so they've all already been ordered to be removed from this country. Now, that doesn't mean they all have additional felony convictions, but they've gone through a process where they've been found to be in this country illegally and subject to removal. And that's true for all of them. Many of them have committed criminal offenses. Many of them were apprehended in the process of committing criminal offenses. But the reality is, if you're on a final order of removal, whether you have a criminal conviction or not, apart from that, for us is irrelevant. I mean, you were ordered to be removed, you should be removed.
You've talked about Florida being the standard, but I guess my overall question here is, why does Florida need to fill the gap? We just had the president sign this one big beautiful bill that allowed for tens of billions of dollars in funding. Why is it that Florida needs to step up?
Well, from the time the president took office till now, they didn't have that. They had a very weakened DHS and ICE because Biden neutered the agency. The interior enforcement collapsed. So we filled a huge role in these first 6 months of the Trump administration. This can serve as a force multiplier. Even with all the money that's going to flow in, first of all, it's going to take time to get that up and running to where you're going to see operational impacts. But even if you had that today, with the amount of illegals that are in this country, I don't see how you get to their number in 4 years, even close, without state and local cooperation. So I am absolutely would be willing if the president called me and said, listen, I got them all. We're going to be able to get rid of all of them. You guys don't need, I'd be fine with that. But the reality is that's just not true. The state and locals, if you're not, and we interact more with people on the street than federal authorities. Now, they may have an order for removal, so then they know who to go get. But just in the random course of things, if an illegal alien runs into your car driving drunk, it's our highway patrol most likely that's going to know that And they're going to have to work with ICE at some level to be able to effectuate this. So, but I don't think, if you look at the current trajectory of the numbers of deportation and extrapolate current pace, they're not even going to come close. And so you do need more help.
So to follow up on the numbers question, are you saying that to meet the goals of the current administration, they're going to have to be Alligator Alcatraz type facilities in all 50 states?
Well, I don't know about that, but I think the reality is, if you look at the number of arrests, if you look at the number of removals per day, you have to increase those numbers. And there's a variety of ways you can do it. I mean, a facility like this isn't the only way. I think ICE has existing facilities that they likely will be able to expand. You know, they do have a facility in South Florida, this Chrome facility. They potentially can expand that. And so if DHS wants to take ownership of all of the detainee processing, housing, and removal, then we'd be fine with that too. But they don't have the room. And when we were doing our stuff to start the year, you know, we would say, what do you need? What do you need? And it's like space, because we were bringing them in faster than they can hold them or process them. And so you don't want to be in a situation where you have illegals that have to be released into the community because there's not enough space. And our sheriffs will use some of their local jails. But, you know, we got guys that are raping and murdering U.S. citizens that are doing that. They obviously have to be held accountable in the criminal process in those facilities. So I think it's a resource issue. I do think that they have an opportunity to greatly expand it. How quickly they could do that, though, I don't know. This is the federal government, after all, and it just takes them a little bit longer.
Even the Trump administration?
He's doing much better, but it's a massive bureaucracy. And like the procurement and all this stuff, how that done. You know, what we did in Florida to get this is over 6 years in the making of breaking down bureaucratic barriers, cutting red tape. That's how we could build the bridge in 3 days after the hurricane, because we've really perfected that art. I also probably have more authority to do that than they may at the federal, because there's so much bureaucracy. You also have a lot of bureaucrats that have been there that may not be used to moving. So I think there's a whole host of factors, but the reality is they've got resources. Getting that on target, I think, is the key.
I want to ask you, you are named in this ACL lawsuit against the Trump administration, which alleges that some of the detainees here do not have access to legal representation. Our detainees here, can you assure, the American public, some of these people who say that they have family members in this facility, that they have access to lawyers?
And Kevin Guthrie, our division, the guy overseeing this, he debunked that. Now, there was some of the IT, some of the email addresses. So they've remedied that. They are entitled to that, and they are being provided that. And they're even going to start 24-hour visits for lawyers. So they're going to be able to come around the clock.
Gotcha. And then final question here, Governor. For every migrant that leaves Alligator Alcatraz and gets into one of these flights to leave the United States, are you 100% confident that that person who leaves the United States from Alligator Alcatraz doesn't have a legal right to be in this country?
So that's not a decision that we make. That's obviously a decision.
But you're certainly involved in the process.
Yeah. And so what I would say is, when you've already been ordered to be removed, like the illegals we're talking about here, is it possible that somehow that removal order, even though you went through the due process, that these are human institutions? I think it's possible, just like people can be convicted criminally. I mean, we just did a payment for a guy who was in jail in Florida, and he got released because he was wrongfully convicted. So sometimes that can happen, but I can tell you, ICE has no interest, and they have no interest in utilizing their resource to go after anybody that has a legal right to be here. That is not their intent. They are focusing on people who are in violation of the law. My sense is the people that have already been ordered to be removed invariably do meet that, and I think it's appropriate. But I can tell you, ICE's intent is to do it by the book.
Final question here. I want to give you a chance to respond to some of your Democratic critics. Florida Representative Maxwell Frost, he toured the facility previously, said it was inhumane. You had a former Biden administration DHS spokesperson compare Alligator Alcatraz to Guantanamo Bay. What's your response to those allegations?
Do you honestly think they are going to say that this is professionally run? No matter what you did, do you honestly think that they would ever say that? Of course they're not going to say that. This is a political thing for them. But it's interesting you bring up Gitmo, because I served in Gitmo when I was on active duty. I remember the hysteria that the left did at that. And I show up to Gitmo And I'm like, this is a professionally run facility. Well, there are a number of different facilities. You had the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the maximum security. You had some that were just open air. These detainees are playing soccer. And so that was fake narrative, what they did about Gitmo. And what they're doing here is fake narrative. But let's just be clear. The Democrats that are making those charges, two things are true. None of them ever raised any questions, showed any sympathy for the victims of illegal immigration, because I know we have them in Florida. I've never seen these guys show sympathy for the victims of illegal immigration. And number two, those people that make those outlandish charges invariably do not believe illegal aliens should be deported at all. They think you have a right to come illegally and stay. They think just being deported is somehow inhumane. And so if you can't deport anybody, then you obviously can't enforce the law. And it can't be a one-way ratchet where they get to let in 10 million and then somehow when the American people want that remedied, that the American people aren't entitled to see those 10 million brought back to their own country.
Thank you very much for your time, Governor.
Thanks for coming down.
That was Phil Wegman interviewing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. You can read Phil's full story on RealClearPolitics.com. I'm Andrew Walworth, and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and for our next segment, we've invited Charlie Stone, a contributor at RCP, to share his latest interview that he conducted for the RCP video series, The Unknowns. Charlie's guest is Neil Hoyne. He's Google's chief strategist and author of Converted, the Data-Driven Way to Win Customers' Hearts. Now, here's Charlie Stone in conversation with Neil Hoyne.
You know, I got to tell you, I love magic. And I love good magic and bad magic and all magic. And then when I tried Google's VO, it was like magic. Like,
that is.
Tell me how this works. Give me all the trade secrets, every proprietary secret,
every single thing, and into a half hour.
Yeah. No, what's going on? Like, it seems to me that this AI synthetic, my son calls the whole thing clankers. It's kind of funny. But it seems to be evolving very rapidly.
It is. And so here I'll give you the sense. Here's how it works. Let's simplify it down. I don't want to remove the magic by revealing the trick, but by understanding the basics, it starts to piece together the intuition, which is these models, whether we're talking about text or video or pictures, are pattern matching. Let's take a look at a whole bunch of things and try to make sense. But we're not necessarily going in and saying, today we're going to teach you what fingers look like. Or I think Will Smith eating spaghetti was one of the common benchmarks for video. We're going to let these models figure it out, which means they can scale to all the data that's out there. They don't need somebody in there saying, today we're going to learn this subject or that subject. Now, you load all this data in. This is where this great appetite of AI companies for data comes in, because the more data you have, the more patterns you can tease out, the more specificity you have. And so you go from those and you have all these patterns. Now, then what you end up with is you end up with gaps. Now, some of these gaps are unintentional. Maybe we didn't load in enough data. Other cases, it's, hey, these models are behaving in ways we didn't expect. Now, you can certainly go rerun these and try to build different patterns and different models. That's where you see the large changes happening when models go from 3 or 4 to 5. But you also have to remember that behind the scenes of these models, oddly enough, is a very large human component, which are individual humans saying something was wrong about those models. Let's provide that model a different set of instructions. And now and then, either through unintentional leaks or because they're able to get the AI models to reveal them across companies. And these are interesting. I was looking at one from Anthropic's Claude. These instructions are released. And there's a certain irony behind it, because people talk about AI replacing humans. And here you have human beings behind the scenes working to make those AI models better.
So the thing that fascinates me about invention and technology, like when they invented the wheel, right? The wheel is still around, right? It's like they got it right the first time. Now there's been variations, optimizations of the wheel, different ingredients, et cetera, but it's still a wheel.
It is.
I think we're on to something new, right? Every day it's something, there's some available new impressive thing AI seems to do. to your point, there are humans that are mentoring it. But here's the big question. Is there a time when AI is like, we got it. We learned everything?
That becomes a question then to say, can AI learn something if there's no data behind it? So at least in the current iteration, it doesn't have a sensory understanding of the world that we do. I spent some time earlier this week at the Culinary Institute learning Mexican food, and we follow the recipe, right, as given. Mix this at this part, and something's still off in the dish. And as it turned out, it was where the sausage or the chorizo was sourced from. And it took a chef to be able to taste that and now to say, okay, here's how I would correct for that problem. But you would imagine AI, would AI just follow the recipe? How does it get the additional inputs? Equally, when presenting to someone, AI may have a script or a narrative. We've all seen presenters on stage. They read the narrative, but they can't read the audience. How the audience is responding, how they react. Does AI not only have a sensor to manage, I could imagine a camera could look at the audience, but does it have the intuition and the backing to respond? Has anybody ever commented on that? Or do we simply see the results of the production? We see the movie, the completed work. And so what it really challenges us with any invention, I think AI is a large invention because of the impact that it can have. But you're right, the wheel came out there. Our CEO, Sundar, was on 60 Minutes saying that this may be as important, as impactful as fire. And we always think about it. When fire came out, I imagine thousands of years ago in a cave, it's likely that somebody burned their food. It's likely that somebody died of carbon monoxide poisoning. They burned all their possessions. And then they learned the rules and they said, okay, we have to contain this. This is how we treat it. These are the unintended consequences of working with this. And fast forward to the modern day. We have flammability standards for buildings. We have emergency exit procedures. We have sprinklers to say we can use this technology in a responsible way.
As you look at young kids coming out of college, what advice would you give them?
I think a lot of the students that I've met took jobs and disciplines that they weren't necessarily interested in, but were safe, right? You go to college and you say, this field always has job openings, so I will go into this field. The gap, I think, of where AI is today and the people that are getting hired is really that passion and that intuition, what AI cannot do. So if you go into, say, a computer science program, I've met some computer science graduates who have a wonderful understanding of every lesson that they've learned, but they don't love the field. They don't tinker with the field. They don't try to go beyond what their curriculum taught them. And so what we're actually finding is that a lot of the curriculums, I would argue, are outdated for what's necessary. What people really need is they need that experience to say, you may have learned how to code. Seek out people that can tell you, what does that process look like internally for developing the standards and the vision of that product? How do you respond to customer needs and interactions? How do you talk to other teams to make progress? And what even the engineers that I work with at Google will tell you, they come into the job thinking coding is 80% of the job. And for some of them, they're like, it's actually really close to 20%. It's a lot of those skills of understanding how the world and the people act. Those are the gaps where AI is not. AI cannot tell you how to bring these companies together. Now, there is that difficult problem where people going into college, I would say you want to lean in on those skills, the gaps that AI cannot address, as opposed to just the raw technical skills. But at the same time, this message has to be heard by leaders of industry to say, for all the companies that are out there saying, you know what, we're going to cut costs and cut junior employees. I said, well, okay, well, where are you going to get the advanced ones from? And I've seen leaders on both sides of this. I've seen some that say, my responsibility as a leader is to minimize costs, deliver value back to shareholders. That's my job. I met another gentleman who said, my job is not only to do that stuff, but realize that part of it to ensure the stability of our company is that I need to hire junior programmers knowing that AI can do their job, because if I don't train them, they don't have the skills to become our more senior developers. And so this is a future-proofing strategy for us and a responsibility, which comes to the larger question that we're forced to ask ourselves as leaders and in students. What are we delivering that's valuable to this world? Is it that we're making emails and PowerPoint decks, and that if AI replaces that, we lose our value? Or very similar to where we started, this idea of creating things where there's not a data set, a viewpoint, or a sensor to measure it, but to say the world needs this, and in which case AI is there to accelerate it. Where we can go from an idea and instead of having to raise money to be able to build a quick prototype over a weekend that shows that it's possible. And so it's really those questions to say, what really makes us people? What makes us valuable? And how do we contribute back? And if all the garbage falls by the wayside, I'll be happy.
Neil, thank you so much. Appreciate your time and look forward to talking to you again.
You've been listening to RCP contributor Charlie Stone in conversation with Google chief strategist Neil Hoyne. You can hear and see the full exchange as well as more of Charlie's interview series on RealClearPolitics.com and on our YouTube channel. And that will do it for today's program. I'm Andrew Walworth. On behalf of everyone at RCP, thanks for joining us. We'll be back here tomorrow. Have a great evening.